Hello. In this video I'm going to be demonstrating the installation of Ricochet's half-inch UHMW skid plates on a Honda Talon. Now we offer two skid plate sets for this machine, our half-inch UHMW and then also our 3/16 aluminum. This video will suffice for both installations. It's pretty much the same. There's a couple hardware differences between the two plates, but they pretty much mount up the exact same way. So this video will represent both the aluminum set and the half-inch UHMW set. So the first thing you need to do is to remove all the stock factory plastic skid plates. Once you have that off, then you're ready to start the installation of your Ricochet plates. So we're going to take the first plate here. It doesn't really matter which order you install the plates. It's probably a little easier to go front to rear on this machine. So that's how I'm going to do that. This front plate here, it's just picking up all the factory mounting points. There's none of our clamps or anything. It's just going to be the cup washers and the flange bolts. So we'll just get this up and into position. Okay, now you have once you get a couple of the bolts started, you can just let the plate hang and then go in and start all the other bolts and cup washers. We're also going to leave everything loose for now until we get all the plates on, and then we'll adjust everything for the best fit. There's also two mounting points up here. I'm actually going to come back and do those last once we get all the other plates on and everything adjusted and tightened down. Then I'll install these two mounts up here. But for now, I'm just going to leave those out and just deal with the cup washers. Like I say, we're just leaving everything loose. So that's loosely installed. These back mounts here are a common mount, so we're going to leave those out and get the next plate in place. Okay, now this plate, you can see how it's machined. It's relieved on this side, same as this plate on this back side. This is going to tuck underneath this. Like I said, these are all going to be common mounts, so you can see how everything butts up there and nice and flush. So I'm going to start these two mounts on the side first. Once you get those started again, you can just let the plate hang. And now we can go through and start the common mounts. And then again, everything's loose, so we can move it all around and line up all the holes and whatnot. So we're going to leave everything loose until the very end. So that takes care of that, and then the next plate's going to overlap just like this did, so we're going to leave these out for now. Okay, so now we can go ahead and get this plate in. And like I say, it's going to slide underneath just like that previous plate did. Okay, that's all the cup washers that aren't common mounts, and now we can come through and start the common mounts. Okay, so there's all the cup washers. We do have some clamps on this rear plate, so now we can go ahead and get those in. So with this UHMW set, this is one of the differences in the hardware. With the UHMW set, anywhere we're running a tubing clamp or a bar clamp or a nut plate, you're going to have the bolt with the washer, and then there's going to be this spacer. And basically is what that spacer is where it's bolting to the UHMW. You could actually just, if you kept tightening it, you could actually just pull this straight through the material. So this spacer is going to butt up against that clamp. It's still going to, compress the plate to get a tight fit, but you just can't keep going. It's just a stop is what that is. The aluminum doesn't require that. You can't pull the bolt through the aluminum, so that's one of the differences in hardware. But like I say, it's picking up pretty much the exact same mounting points and whatnot, so it's almost an identical installation between the aluminum and the UHMW. That's just one of the slight differences in the hardware there. So you've got these three larger clamps, and you'll just you'll see where they are placed according to the hardware guide. And then anytime you're going into, like I say, one of our tubing clamps or bar clamps, you're going to want to put anti-seize on these bolts. These clamps, they have a all metal locking nut on it, and anti-seize will help it go on, and then also it'll keep it from rusting or whatnot, getting all corroded. So if you ever need to take it off for whatever reason, it won't be fighting you being all rusty and everything else. So a little smear of anti-seize on the bolts. And again, we're just leaving everything loose for now. Okay, now that just leaves us two more clamps in the rear. Okay, so that's all the mounting hardware except for those two front ones, like I say, but I'm going to come back to those later. So now we can actually go through and tighten everything down. I prefer to tighten the cup washers first to make sure everything sits down into its counterbore, everything's all lined up. If you don't do that first, you might run into an issue. If you tighten your clamps first, you might run into an issue with the plate being slightly out of adjustment, the cup washers not wanting to seat down in their counterbore correctly. So I usually line everything up and make sure all the cup washers are seated correctly, and then tighten all the cup washers, and then you can go ahead and tighten the clamps from there. This is actually one of our easier sets to install. Honda was kind enough to give plenty of good, strong factory mounting points that we were able to pick up. So there's minimal clamps and hardware, so it really makes for a simple, clean installation. Okay, so that takes care of all the cup washers. So now we can go through and tighten up the clamps that we've installed. When you're tightening the clamps, it's usually a good idea to kind of hold the clamp over the tube with your hand as you're tightening it to make sure it doesn't rotate off that tube. They usually don't, but they can. Once you start to snug it up, it'll pinch down and stay put. Okay, so that takes care of all the clamps. Now we have those two front mounts. And when you look in here, you'll see a little kind of sheet metal flange. You're going to take your nut plate and you're going to set it over the top of that flange. And then start your bolt. And all this is doing, and there really isn't a decent mount out here, and this plate can kind of flex down. So this is just gonna grab that little sheet metal flange and keep that plate from flexing down. And then you'll just want to make sure that that doesn't rotate off that sheet metal flange as you tighten the plate down. Might need to get a wrench or something on it to keep it hung up on that, but that'll give that plate support, so if it does catch something, it won't tend to yank down. Like I say, just double check to make sure you're catching that flange. Okay, so that takes care of the belly skids. As you can see, that was a pretty straightforward, easy installation there. So now we have this top piece to put on. Okay, for this top piece, you've got 3 different bar clamps, 2 with a single nut and then 1 with a double. The 2 single ones are going to sit in the frame with these big circles here. You're going to want to put those into position first. Just set it right there against the frame in its approximate location. And then it's probably going to be easiest to start the front mounts first. And again, you want to put anti-seize on all these bolts. You just set the plate up into position. That plate's going to go on behind it. And then just start the bolts. Like I say, it'll be easier to start the top ones first because that way the plate will already be hung and then you're not trying to hold the plate up there. Line up that nut plate and get the bolt started. It's a little bit cumbersome if you start from the rear. Okay, so those are loosely on. Now we can start the rear mounts. And there's a little access hole. You can get your finger in there to move that nut plate around and hold it in position while you're starting it. Okay, now everything's started. You want to make sure the plate's all the way back and square to the machine. That looks pretty good. And then you can just tighten down those 4 bolts. Okay, so that takes care of the belly skids. Like I say, it's pretty easy installation for this machine. And you got access to your diff drain holes, front and rear, engine oil. So all your maintenance you can do without having to pull the plate off. Okay, now we're ready to install the front A-arm skids. First thing you want to do is pull off the factory guard over here. And then on this machine, you've actually got 2 different sizes of clamps. So referring to your hardware guide, we'll show you the placement of it. We've got the 1 1/8 clamps up front, the 1 1/4 in the rear. So first thing you're going to do is take one of your 1 1/8, the front clamps, and a bolt. Make sure you put some anti-seize on that bolt. You're going to set the A-arm skid up into position. I usually like to try and start a front clamp first. There we go. If you start a front one, once you get one hung, you can, one started, you can just let the plate hang. If you start a rear one, the plate will usually just fall off. So it's usually a little bit easier to get a front one started first. Also, installing these A-arm skids, you have to make sure that you do have the wheels off the ground and the suspension is fully unloaded. Just to check for clearance, which I'll demonstrate here in just a second. Okay, right now I'm just going to snug this down. I'm not going to fully tighten it. I just want to get it where the plate isn't going to be moving around. So now that that's snugged, now you need to go ahead and check for clearance. And as what you want to do, you need to turn the wheel full lock. Check for clearance all the way around on the back side with the wheel and the tire. And then you need to come in full lock again. And again, check for interference or whatnot. Make sure you're good. I'm a little close here, so it looks like I need to pull this in up a little bit. There we go, that looks a little better. Double check it again. Okay, that looks pretty good. Once you're happy with the fit and that you do have clearance, then you can go ahead and just tighten down the rest of the hardware. Okay, so that takes care of the front A-arm installation. It's the same for left and right, so I'm just going to demonstrate it once for the video. So now we can go ahead and let's do a trailing arm skid. Okay, now we're ready to install the trailing arm skids here. These are fairly straightforward. You're going to have 2 long bolts with nuts and washers, and then 2 aluminum mounting blocks. And all you're going to do is just take your trailing arm skid, slide it up around the trailing arm here. You're going to take one of your mounting blocks, set it in between. You have 2 mounting points, there's a front and a rear. You're going to set it in between that, slide the bolt through, put a washer on, and then follow that with a nut. And we're going to do the exact same thing on the rear. Once you get both those on, just double check the placement of it. It really kind of only fits one way. Make sure it's all the way up, that it's butted up and seated against the trailing arm, and then you can just tighten it down. When you tighten it down, you'll see it start to pull these mounting flanges together. It's actually going to just pinch it around the trailing arm, so that's normal. They're going to have a little bit of a gap when you first start, and then just go ahead and tighten it down, and it'll pull everything in and give you a good tight cinch down fit. Okay, that one's tight. There's nothing you need to check for clearance or anything back here. It's not like the front. It can just go on. There's nothing that's going to get in the way of it. Okay, so that takes care of the the trailing arm skid, and again, it's the exact same procedure for left and right. So for the video, I'm just going to demonstrate it the one time, and that just leaves us our floorboard skids. Okay, to mount the floorboard, if you've already installed the belly skids here, these two mounts here are going to be a common mount with the floorboard. So those mounts need to come out. Okay, so we have the two common mounts out. You also need to remove the first, the last, and the middle. I think it's actually a rivet back here. So plastic rivet, and then, so the first, the middle, and the last bolts here on the side. These two can stay. So first thing we're gonna do is we'll take the plate, get it up into position. And just start this common bolt again. If I can find the thread. There we go. Okay, so we have those two common mounts started, and we're just going to leave those loose for now. And now you've got 3 different length bolts. You got 2 longer ones, then a shorter one. The 2 longer ones are going to go up on the front here. And then we've got the one with the nut. It's a little bit tight on this side to get your hand in there because the fuel tank's right there, but it is doable. It is a little working by braille here, but okay, so that's started. So now that everything's started, we can go ahead and just tighten everything down. I'm going to start with these common mount cup washers first. And then we have the last one with the nut. Like I say, this is the harder side to do because the fuel tank is right here, so it's a little tight to get your hand in there. The other side's wide open, so I'm demonstrating the difficult side for you. Okay, so that takes care of the floorboard. And again, it's the exact same procedure for the other side. So for the video, I'm just going to demonstrate it the one time. So that's going to complete our installation of our Ricochet UHMW skid plates and with A-arms. So you can see you got the 1/2 inch UHMW, belly front to rear, left to right. Got our aluminum A-arm skids, our aluminum trailing arm skids, and your aluminum floorboard skids here. So like I say, it's a pretty easy set to install. There's no drilling or anything like that required. Pretty straightforward. It's picking up most of the factory mounting points. You know, then we have some of the bar clamps and the nut plates and whatnot, but should be a good set for you and your machine for years to come. Thanks for watching.